Last week I said that isolation can lead to anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, sometimes even suicide. But what does it mean to have isolation with God? Let's have a chat. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So glad that you're here. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like before we jump right into today's video. In today's video, we're going to be talking all about isolation with God. And it's so funny because this is the thing about doing YouTube and stuff. One week I could say one thing, and then the following week, God could give me a whole new revelation about it. And it's so funny because last week I was like, isolation leads to this, isolation leads to that. And those are all true things, but isolation with God is a different thing, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's something that we shouldn't be scared of, even though it's kind of a little bit scary, which we're going to talk about. And this kind of came about for a few things where I was just processing a moment that I was going through. I was like, I really feel like God is isolating me. And I've heard people say that, be like, oh, God is going to hide you, like God's going to put you in like a hiding place, he's going to hide you. But I feel like it was never something that I felt like I experienced or was going to go through. I don't know, I just never thought of isolation as a thing that I had to go through. But when I began to think, I'm like, oh, that's exactly what God is doing. And then I also went somewhere last night, and they were singing a song where it's a song, I will exalt you, where it says, my hiding place, my refuge. And I really thought about the fact that a lot of us present at the club, God is working on me now, so we're a little bit better. But a lot of us, I don't think we can boldly say that God is our hiding place and God is our refuge, and he should be. And as they were really singing that song, God began to talk to me, and he was like, a lot of us, I did this as well. A lot of people in our life, they're gods. Anybody that you put above God is an idol, it's a god. And I really thought about it. I was like, there are a lot of times where if anything ever happened, I had to talk to people first. I had to, like, God was like the last person that I talked to, which is so bad. And like I said, I always kind of thought isolation was like a little bit of a bad thing. But I even think about Jesus. I feel like Jesus also, he didn't start his ministry till he was 30. He had that moment where God was kind of preparing him. And I think of isolation with God as that. God is preparing you for the next season of your life. But I really, really want to touch on the topic of gods and making people in your life gods, because I was that type of person where if I didn't tell at least 3 people what I was going on, I was not gonna be happy. I had to talk to everybody. I had to share my problems with everybody. Why wouldn't I? Like, I had to call at least 3 or 4 different people and be like, hey, this is what I'm going through. Hey, this is what I'm going through. Hey, this is what, like, I had to. At the first time I had trouble, my response was never talk to God. It was always talk to maybe your sister, talk to your mom, talk to a friend, talk to a loved one. It was always talk to people. And I think this also leads to a whole discussion about, I think that's why a lot of us sometimes we struggle with having friendships in our lives and having relationships with people in our life, because we put so much pressure on these people we put so much pressure on people to fill a role that only God can fill. And I think that happens when you put people on a pedestal, because you want to explain something to, like, you're explaining something to them and you feel like they should have every single solution possible for you. You feel like they should just fill that role of God in your life, and like, people are gonna fail. Like, it's just like they're not meant to fill that role. That role can only be filled with God. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that comes along with isolation, of knowing that like nobody will fill that role but God. And I think when God kind of hides you and is like, okay, let's go into a secret place with just me and you become okay with just the idea of God. And one of the things that I really, really processed recently, and I feel like I see this constant joke on TikTok about how one of the fastest prayers that God can answer is the one where, God, if this person not meant for me, take them out of my life. But I feel like another prayer that God answers really fast, and I don't think a lot of people pray it, that's why, it's God, change my appetite. I began to pray this prayer, like, God, change my appetite. I honestly do it when I'm struggling with like fast food and stuff, and when I need God to like change my appetite, but also my spiritual appetite as well too. And God began to take me through this moment where I got to a point where I honestly didn't even enjoy talking to people as much, and it sounds weird, but like, I didn't get the same satisfaction when I prayed that prayer of like, God, change my appetite. And that was one of the moments that I really knew that like God was really like isolating me, of like, just me and you, my daughter. And one of the things that I emphasize a lot on this channel is really talking to God, because I think a lot of us really need to go through that moment of isolation with God, because people are never going to fill that void in your life. People are never going to fill that hole in your life. Like, the only person that can give you the answers is God. The only person that can walk you through that moment is God. Because when you're living in purpose, as I say on this channel, we're living in purpose, living in alignment of what God has called us to. You're gonna go through moments where like people are not gonna understand. Like you're following what God has told you to do. You're living in obedience and all that stuff. People are not gonna understand. Shoot, you're not even gonna understand. And I think talking to people, it's like they're gonna try to empathize with you as much as they can, but they don't understand. Like I said, you don't even understand. And I think you will get to a point where you only find comfort in talking to God because like He's the author and finisher of our faith. So it's kind of like, God, I don't even understand what's going on, but I trust you and I know that you are in control. And I think that comfort can only happen when you like literally isolate yourself and just take it, like set yourself apart a little bit and just be like, okay, God, it's just me and you. Let me find comfort in you. Let me find peace in you. And like, I don't know how to explain it much more than that, but truly I think that moment of like, I only want to talk to God. And I think that's why I really emphasize a lot on this channel about talking to God and journaling. If you have to prop up your camera and record, if you have to write down notes, like always go back to a place of talking to God because God is the only one that can understand. And I think a lot of us really need to let go of depending on other people. And I really just think it changes your mindset about your approach to conversations with people and all that stuff. And this is also another one where like people make jokes about being mysterious. But honestly, like if you're struggling with being like keeping your mouth shut because certain things you don't, not everything that God is telling you don't need to say it out loud. And I think that one of the moments where like God will really work on this with you is like if you're really struggling, because I used to struggle with that of like I had to tell people and like keeping your mouth shut. Honestly, talk to God about it first. Have a moment of like, God, this is just me and you. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. Have that moment where you just talk to God, and I promise you, you won't even be like after you talk to God and God has kind of worked you through it, you won't even feel the need to like, I gotta share this, I gotta share this, I gotta share this. And like God will really just work on you to just, and that shift to isolation with God can be a challenging moment because you're so used to finding comfort in talking to other people that like it's almost like your first reaction where you're like, no, I gotta come back to a place where I talk to God first. It's almost a way where you now need to like rebuild your relationship with people in a way where you don't see them as like, this is like they're your hiding place, like your only hiding place, your only refuge should be God. And it's like you almost have to rewire your brain of having like a relationship where you share, but like they're not the first person you talk to. I hope that makes sense. And it's like, it's one of those things where I'm like, how do I build a relationship without like over telling? And God will help you in that. But you pray to God, God, help me to now build my relationship with people and ask for discernment of like, what can I share, when to share, if I should share. But truly get to a place where you talk to God first, where you literally have a secret place just with God. But truly praying that prayer of like spiritual change my appetite, I think God will begin to do that work in you, and over time it would just almost come naturally to you of like, even when people ask you about stuff, you might even go to like, let me talk to God about it first and then I'll explain later. It's like, let me have my moment with God. And I think that's the beautiful thing about isolation, because like I always say and think, give room for you and God to discuss an issue together before you get 10 different opinions. Sometimes you simply need that moment, that literally isolation moment of just you and God. God, what do you think about this situation? How do you feel about it? What do you want me to do? What action should I take? Before you get 10 different opinions. And by the time you actually hear the opinion of the one who matters the most, you're like, oh, but my friend said this and my friend said that. It's like, no, have God's opinion first before you go to other people. Sometimes God will even send the people to you naturally if He wants you to discuss it with other people. And isolation with God sometimes leads your phone to be very dry. God hiding you sometimes is a very, very difficult thing, because it just sometimes it really does lead to that feeling of like loneliness, and that feeling of loneliness sucks. It sucks. It really, really sucks, because like you just get to that point of like nobody is getting it. And I think that's one of the moments where God is really gonna mold you to where like, yeah, that's the point. Nobody should get it. Like, talk to me first. Like, I'm the only person that gets it. Isolation also causes you to focus, because when you get to a place of just me, God, all the noise tends to like die out, and you just can focus on like, what is God telling me to do? What does God want me to do? Isolation with God leads to focus in God. You're like, let me read the word. Let me study the word. It's just like, me, like literally the best way I can describe is just like me and you, God. And I think that's such a beautiful place to get to in our walk with God, of like, if it's just you I have, God, I will be okay. Regardless of the things, regardless of the people, I will be okay with just you. And I made this analogy a while ago of like, I think finding God for yourself is like, I feel like sometimes you could be in friend groups or just whatever. You just feel like you don't have like your person. Like the person that's just like, that's just like Christina and what's that girl's name? Christina and Meredith. Like you just feel like you don't have your person, your twin flame. Sorry, God is not your twin flame. Oh my gosh, Lord help me. But you just feel like you don't have your person. I think when you find God for yourself, you find your person in God. That's such a beautiful analogy that I feel like God gave me, where get to a point of just me and you. It really, the isolation thing, it really is like a challenging thing, because I don't know, but it's also a beautiful thing, because I also feel like I'm in it a little bit right now, to where I'm just like, even like, you know how when you do something so often, you get to a point where like, it's like if I haven't journaled or talked to God, like sit down and express my feelings in like a day or so, or like 2-3 days, I'm like, something is missing. It's like I have to go back to God, and I really had to learn in this like isolation with God to like lean on God in everything you do. Lean on what he says. Like just talk to him. Like I said, I really was not at peace if I didn't talk to like 3 people first. And God really had to like, I'm gonna separate you. Sit here with me. Let's have a discussion. And it wasn't easy, but one thing that I like to remember is the power of God that raised Jesus Christ from the dead is the same power that lives in us, and that same power will give you strength to handle the isolation season. And I think another beautiful thing about isolation with God is it brings the name Emmanuel to life, where it means God is with us. I think in isolation you realize that God is really with you on every single step of the way, if you were to just listen, if you were to just open your ears to what he's saying to you. I think isolation makes you realize that like God has never left you previously, he would never leave you in the future, and he's still with you in this moment if you just take some time and have that secret time with him. Although it feels lonely because you might not have like a physical person here, I think you remember that God is always with me. He's guiding my every step. Yeah, so I hope you were blessed by this video, and I truly pray that you take the time to journal and just think like, have I been too dependent on other people? Have I put people in the places where God belongs? Like I love journaling because there are a lot of things that sometimes we forget, and literally writing them out, it's like God almost opens your mind to it, and that's just another way to have conversation with him. So really start to think of like, have I gone through a moment with isolation with God, and what would that look like? And my prayer is that God begins to do a work in all of us, to where we find rest in him, we find comfort in him. We don't put people in the places where he belongs, and he truly becomes our hiding place. He becomes our refuge. I believe Psalm 23, I just remembered. Psalm 23 verse 2, it says, he offers a resting place for me in his luxurious love. I love that verse because I think a lot of us, we really need to find our resting place in the love of God. We need to find our resting place in God and not in other people. Stop putting people in a position where they don't have the authority to fill that role. They don't have the manpower to fill that role, because people are people. And I think isolation with God lets you realize that. And I really, really want to encourage everyone also to do a deep dive on Psalm 23, the Passion Translation. I really love that translation, because I think that's also just another moment of like realizing that like just me and God. Yeah, that's just another Bible verse that I really, really want to encourage you to do a study on. Anyway, that's it for me, y'all. I wanted to keep this video very short and sweet, of just isolation with God is not a bad thing, and isolation with God leads to growth. Anyway, that's it for me, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye. Oh, isolation with God.